We're going to talk about the differences between daily stress and traumatic stress. And I want to share some tips and tools, like some pitfalls to avoid, as well as some tips for managing stress.
All right, it's that time. It's 30 of the hour, and we start on time so that we can end on time and give you all the value that you need in your day. This is Dr. Kelly OMD, and you have landed in Ask Dr. Kelly OMD, and this is our webinar that we host on Mondays, 4:30 p.m. PST. I'm Dr. Kelly OMD, your board certified OBGYN and healthcare executive here to help you live your healthiest and wealthiest life. And the way that we do that is we focus on the 5 pillars: spiritual, physical, financial, mental, and emotional. And there's 5 things we do every day. We meditate, journal, exercise, optimize our hormones, nutrition, and sleep. Yes, I know that's 6. However, we like the number 5. And we do that and we bring on subject matter experts like the one we have tonight in the room with us. These subject matter experts are going to give us the resources and the tools that we need so we can live our healthiest and wealthiest life. So tonight I have a special guest, Gabrielle Loomis-Annette. She is here with us. We met a few months ago at San Diego Magazine Women's Event, and we hit it off immediately. So Gabrielle, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're going to talk to us about tonight.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. And we did hit it off, and maybe because we're both from Chicago, but I think there's some other reasons too. But I am a licensed counselor, trauma specialist, and advocate for women. I'm also the clinical director of Serona Healing Center. And if folks don't know what Serona Healing Center is, it is a trauma program that's focused on the holistic recovery for women who've experienced sexual assault or domestic violence. And what we're going to talk about today is really traumatic stress. I think we all know what stress is, but we're going to talk about the differences between daily stress and traumatic stress. And I want to share some tips and tools, like some pitfalls to avoid, as well as some tips for managing stress.
And I know this is going to be a great conversation. It is really near and dear to my heart. Ever since I met Gabrielle, it has just been in a relationship of alignment. And Serona Healing really is like a full circle type of experience because we actually had a mutual friend that we met years ago. And then when we both, Gabrielle, myself, and our friend, sat down and we were like, wait, we know each other. So continuing to do this work. As many of you know, in my history, and this is not TMI for me, but in my history, I've had significant traumas in my history and in my family's history. One of the things we did in college was open up a healing center called Xavier Men Against Rape. And that was so important to me at that time. And it has always been important. So when I met Gabrielle and us having this opportunity to learn more about her as well as the healing center, I was like, hands down, we got to bring it to her. So Gabrielle, I'm going to let you take it over because it ain't about me. It's about you and what your team is able to offer, not only in San Diego, California, but really nationally, how we can be able to get the services that you offer nationally. So go ahead, Gabrielle.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for sharing that. I too am very transparent about sharing that I'm a survivor myself and really come to this work, with all the training and, education and all the things we have, but also with that personal experience. So I always think that that's super important when you're talking about such, topics that can be sensitive. And I wanted to really highlight the difference between daily stress and traumatic stress, because I think as women who are high functioning and get a lot done and very accomplished and successful, we tend to just keep moving through stress, just keep adding things to the list and moving through it, and sometimes don't recognize when things have really kind of crossed the line, we're outside of our bandwidth of being able to cope, or when we've experienced events that are not really just daily stressor events, but actually fall more in the traumatic stress bucket. And, when we talk about like daily stress, we're talking about things that happen every day that are part of life, which we all experience, right? Traffic, we've overslept, we're running late for the day, we had a difficult meeting or an argument with a family member. These are all just part of life. But for those types of stressors, usually our coping systems, our coping mechanisms are effective in managing that stress. So yes, we're affected by it, but we know how to cope with it. And at some point it's over and we just kind of carry on. Now, traumatic stress is when that actually doesn't happen, when the experience overwhelms our existing coping mechanisms. And then we're in a whole new territory of different symptoms and ways that that experience can affect us mentally, emotionally, physically. And it's so important to recognize when that's happened. And the statistics are that 60 to 80% of Americans identify at least one trauma in their life. That's really more of 100% if you ask me as a trauma specialist. And it's not just one, we've all experienced different traumas, whether that's things like losses, that could be people we love, that could be a career, illnesses, accidents, natural disasters. You kind of look at that whole category. And it's like, oh, yeah, most of us have experienced that. And with the work we do at Sorona, we know it's 1 in 3. One
Mm.
in three women have experienced assault or DV. So it's a really large number. And this type of stress goes in a different bucket in our brain and it affects us in more significant ways. Everything from, mood changes, depression, anxiety, and then all the physiological changes, which I'm sure you could really talk about too, whether that's headaches or insomnia or IBS type stuff, the list goes on and on and on. So when we get into that category, it's so important to recognize what's happening so that we can get some help and support.
And I think that you made such good points of, the physiologic response to the stressor. So the traumatic stress versus the daily stress. Thank you for breaking that down. And it reminds me of like ACEs, right? So the adverse childhood events, we just started, especially in California, the state of California, we do a lot of screenings and one of those is ACEs screenings. And when I took my first ACEs, and if anybody hasn't heard of this, I would just go ahead and Google ACE, ACE, and take the screening. You take the screening, you're like, oh, wait, I didn't realize that I had this number of this or this number of that. So that makes a huge difference. And thank you for breaking down trauma, because I think a lot of times people think about trauma as of something violent, something major violence or something like that. But you're right. It can be what is traumatic to you, which is going to be different from everybody else. Go ahead.
Exactly. And that what we know about trauma is it's less about the circumstances and facts of what happened. It's what your brain and body did with that.
Mm.
And what your brain and body or my brain and body do with an experience has a lot to do with many different factors, including genetics, including, personality type, prior history, all sorts of factors. So for one person, it may not be. For another person, their brain goes, oh, wait, I am going to put this in the trauma bucket. And the thing that is kind of a little can be a little scary about that is it's not a conscious decision. It's happening in the brain at a level below our consciousness where it's deciding, hey, this is traumatic.
Mhm.
But when these symptoms and signs start to show up, that's when we know, okay, I'm needing some self-care. Like I'm needing to do something for myself so that I can really manage these stress symptoms and not let it continue to, be that PTSD. We know there's a window of about 6 months when we've experienced something traumatic where we call it acute stress disorder. And if we can really get some help and support and start processing through that experience, we have a good chance of it not turning into, PTS or PTSD.
Oh, I think you make such a great point there in regards to that acute area and the chronic area. And thank you for bringing up the fact that if we can address in the acute phase, then we may not have the repercussions, ramifications, and the long-term carrying that we do. Um, that makes me think about many people in different cultures have like the Superwoman syndrome, right? That they have to be strong. I remember being told, what happens in this house, and I'm not saying like I won't say the bad stuff, but when you walk out this door put your face on,
Put
put your
on the
mask on, and this is pre-COVID, and go out and do what you need to do, right? So when I had my medical school interview, they asked me, well, how do you manage stress and everything? I was like, oh yeah, I compartmentalize that and I put this over here and I do what I need to do so that we can, I thought that was the answer. As I grew, yes, there's going to be times we need to compartmentalize. However, the answer now that I give, oh, I got therapists, I got this therapist, this therapist, this therapist. I go talk to the person in the moment. I acknowledge it. I do my mindfulness. I do what I need to do, but I definitely address it almost immediately as possible. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I so appreciate that. I think that is a strategy that many really high functioning, successful women have learned to develop is that ability to just sort of compartmentalize, or I say, put the stress on the shelf. It's like, I'm going to put that over there and I'm going to keep going. Such a useful strategy. It helps us do that. It helps us get through and keep going. And what we know is that stress that's sitting on the shelf does not magically disappear or resolve itself. It actually continues in the background to affect us. And that could be in many different ways. It always, or I should say, it never surprises me when I'm doing EMDR or some sort of deeper processing with someone, and they're like, I didn't think I felt anything about that experience. And then all of a sudden, the emotions are there as if it happened yesterday. Like our brain has the ability to do that, put it on the shelf, kind of freeze it, and we're going to go on, but that doesn't mean it's not affecting us. So,
And I
yes,
think you term
dealing with
that,
these things.
there's the elf on the shelf. I think we term that stress on the shelf, right? I'm
Yes,
gonna give her that trademark.
that's so great.
Okay,
Yes,
let's take the stress off the shelf. All right,
yes.
let's stop hiding it all over the house and see
Because
when we can
because we
release.
run out of room. That is literally what happens in our psyche. There's no more spaces on the shelves. We run out of room and there's nowhere to put things. And then that stress just starts really compiling up.
Absolutely. And I think we have a great comment here. I really appreciate you noting the individual responses. As I recently learned, our body stores 7 generations of trauma in our nervous system.
Wow.
Yeah. So I
I've
think her
heard
name
that.
is Dr. Anita Phillips. She talks about this. She's on
Generational trauma.
the generational trauma and how we're passing it on,
Yes.
whether you're birthing the trauma, you're birthing it
Yes.
that way, or you are, whether it's adopted or however you're passing it on. As you're a caretaker for somebody, you're passing it on to the
Yeah.
next generation, depending on how you manage and how you deal. So I think that's a great point.
Yeah, and we know that it's both nature and nurture, right? We know obviously behaviorally, if there's certain dynamics or patterns in families that can get passed down. Like, military families, as you know, probably have that right. Don't show the emotion, right? Which there's a purpose for that. That gets passed down, but we also know genetically that genes function differently and it gets passed down that way too. So on both ends of it, there's really that generational trauma component.
And it reminds me kind of growing up and how my mom raised my sisters who are 15, 20 years different, like my older siblings versus me, and how she did talk through a lot more things. But when she was younger, she was not able to talk through as many things because you're just
You didn't
coming
have the
out of a
tools.
certain generation. Yeah, you didn't have the tools. You're just coming out of a certain generation that did things a lot differently. And as you learn, then you're able to, okay, this is how I'm able to do this with you differently, which is how I was able to do some things differently with my child. Also grateful for the therapists and the counselors when I was pregnant and raising him to make sure that I did verbalize some of the things and that they were able to give me feedback to say, I might recommend trying this instead of this way.
You listened, you took that feedback. That's great.
I did. And now he uses it on me. Mom, I'm gonna need you to take a
Full
breath
circle.
and listen. And listen. And then yes, child. So yeah, but thank you so much for that. So
Yeah.
daily stress versus traumatic stress.
And
Uh,
when we're in that traumatic stress, we can put it on the shelf temporarily, but we need to take it down and we need to deal with it.
right,
Yeah.
absolutely. All
And
right.
and then the other thing I wanted to share is just a really simple tip for managing both daily and traumatic stress, which is we may not have a lot of control over circumstances or things that are happening. We certainly have control over how we respond. And one of the ways in which we respond is what we say yes to and what we say no to. And again, I'm speaking to the same woman that I think we could all relate, right? We're so used to doing everything. And there's this great quote that says we can do anything, but not everything.
Mm.
And we're so used to that that my tip is to think about saying no just 20% more of the time this next week. Not 80%, not you don't have to do some big thing, but 20% of the time, really think about what's going to be the cost to my well-being, the cost to my time or energy or stress if I say yes and consider saying no. It can really make such a difference in increasing our ability to cope, our bandwidth to cope with daily stress and, of course, traumatic stress too.
Yeah, and depending on what type of culture you grew up in, as far as at home, at work, like you said, being in the military, the answer is yes until we figure out, you know what I'm saying? Because it's a lot of superiority type things. So you just have to say yes and then go from there. And sometimes when we have these different systems, those are the things that we have to, those are the things we learn how to do as we mature in life. I
Mhm.
remember when I was younger, a guy was trying to date me and he was like, "Do you say anything but no?" And I'm like, "No." But that's because I had traumatic events. And I'm like, yeah, no, we're going to create some significant boundaries here so we can do that. Now, as I got older and in the system of the culture that I was in, as far as at work, then I was like, okay, now I need to figure out how do I prioritize the important things.
Yes.
Currently, I'm reading two books, The 12-Week Year and The One Thing. And that's helping me be able to say no without having to explain, full sentence, no. And,
Mhm.
you have to, well, it's something you have to learn how to do and stick with it.
And manage your own emotions, manage what comes up for you when you say no. That's another big part of it, right? As women, I think sometimes we carry a lot of responsibility, guilt, obligation, all the things. We're taking care of everybody's emotions, right? Not ours. And so saying no means somebody's going to be disappointed or upset with me. And we have to learn how to manage that and be okay with that in
Right.
order to be able to say no.
And I think those are the big things. And thanks for saying those words out loud. Disappointing. Somebody's being upset. Fear of missing out.
Mm.
It's like, I don't want anybody to know that I can't afford to do this right now. Whatever the case may be, that's associated with that. So I
Yeah.
think that makes a good point of creating boundaries, self assessment of what feelings you're experiencing when you have that, and then just being honest with the person that you're talking to, and honest with yourself about, okay, this is how we're going to be able to manage or deal with that. All
Yeah.
right. And then you said you had the third thing for us.
Oh, that was the third thing, the
That
non.
was it. Okay.
Yes.
Sounds
The
good. Yeah.
second one is
Oh,
take
the,
it off
the
the shelf.
conversation has gone so fast. The conversation has gone so fast. So if anybody has any questions or anything that they want to ask us, this is the times, kind of our Q&A time, that we can go through that. You can either raise your hand, come off mute, or come off video if you want. Please remember that it is being recorded. So choose as you wish, and we're happy to answer the questions from there. Let's see. Something I've learned. I'm reading at the same time. Something I've learned that is so empowering to me is that ultimately I am my 100% responsibility. It helps me to be clear about who I am and who I am not. Manage my resources and know that everything I need is either already here or attainable and is here for my support. So go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I was typing and you said that, and I was like, oh, I'll just stop.
Okay,
I'll
sounds
just
good.
stop. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I was just listening in, very excited because these types of conversations to me really remind me of when I started to have my pivot. I, like probably most women, either on this call or in the world, had what you mentioned, Dr. Kelly, that Superwoman syndrome, right? And something that I recognized when I started to what I consider just deconstruct just my whole life, right? I started to recognize that some things I put on myself. It was never required of me. It was those mores and folkways that we just adopted because that's what we were around. And then it became easy or our excuse as to why we did something. But in reality, nobody told us to take on some of this stuff. No one told us to do that. We just saw it, we duplicated it, or like you all mentioned earlier, those epigenetics, right? Those things that are in our body that cause those responses from us, but we never pulled them apart and thought to for me. I never pulled them apart and asked myself, is this mine to carry? Right? Is this mine to bear? And when I started to audit myself in that way and really recognize that I am 100% my responsibility, I really began to pull back and audit everything in my life. Why do I like what I like? Why do I dislike what I don't like? Right? Who am I? What do I want outside of everything it is that has been either assumed of me or that I have created for myself? Like I created my life as a wife and a mom. I did that, but I didn't create my life as a daughter, right? So I had, those are two different roles, and I had to figure out what I wanted from each one. And so once I recognized that, I became almost hyper aware of all the resources around me that were literally here to support me, because I was willing to say and be authentic and courageous in this is who I am. This is what I like. This is what I want. I never said that. I don't have to do that, right? I don't have to comply with something that I never agreed to, or just because it's out in the ether that women do this or moms do that. But I recognize that a lot of the reason that I didn't do that was because of courage. I didn't have the courage to either not be liked or be different or ... whatever that ellipse is, right? But once I started to really double down and cement myself in, my mama and daddy, as wonderful as they are, they can't fix it for me. My snookums, my husband, as amazing as he is, he can't fix it for me. As my children who are amazing. I mean, I just have all the amazing things. Best childhood ever, married to my high school sweetheart, all the wonderful things. But I was still figuring out, well, if all of that's right, what's wrong with me? Right? And I had to recognize something's wrong because I say it's wrong. Just like something's right because I say it's right.
Right.
So if that's my responsibility, then I started to really learn to audit everything that I did in a way that says, does this align with who it is that I'm choosing or I dream myself to be? And once I started doing that, it illuminated for me all the people that were here to support me, all the things that were already there. I didn't have to reinvent the wheel in some of the things I was going after and wanted to do. And I could become vulnerable and say, I need help. I don't know. Can you help me? And let go of, oh man, I'm 50 now, so I should know that. I don't care if anybody, you know what I mean? I am my responsibility. I want it now. So that was just a game changer for me. And I've been living in that, really, I call it my dream, my conscious dream, for about 10, 12 years now. And it's something like amazing.
It is amazing. And first of all, thank you so much for sharing with us. I love hearing about your transition, your pivot, and how you are taking yourself 100% accountability, because we create the lives that we choose to create based on, you know what I'm saying? There's going to be things that come up. But Gabrielle, did you want to give us some feedback or, have anything to add on to what she was saying?
Well, I just so appreciate you sharing, Sherilyn, and that you did have, sounds like such an incredible shift, and, are taking that kind of ownership and responsibility for your experience. And I just thought it was beautiful when you shared that when you started to do that, you saw all this support and resources around you. And I think that that's a wonderful phenomenon that I continue to experience not only for myself, but I see that for clients too.
Yeah, I think that makes such a huge difference when we allow ourselves, and that's vulnerability, right? So it's being vulnerable to say, I need help. And it's amazing. We all know that we are surrounded by these wonderful people, many of them women, and of course our allies as well. That's what I call non-women allies. And we all know we do this for each other. Like, it's like, you tell me you need something. If I have the time, the space, I'm dropping it and I'm coming to you and being like, okay, what do we need? And how are we about to organize this? And how are we about to help you? But I got to know what you need. I can't just infer, I can look in your eyes and be like, oh, something looks not right. Or I can hear it in your tone of voice. Oh, something doesn't sound right. Or when you disappear, because people disappear when they're going through things and you're like, I haven't heard from you. What's going on? But I think it's really important for us to be vulnerable enough to say we need help, be willing to receive the help, and then give up control over certain things when that help comes along.
Yeah. Yes. To all of the above. Yes.
All of
And
it.
unfortunately, I think for most of us, we have the experience of being in enough pain. Like pain is what drives us to do that. And then once we start doing that, and we realize we get the benefits of vulnerability and support, and it starts to become this positive thing, then we're more oriented to do it. But I think most of us arrive in those first, times where we're really truly breaking through that shell and creating that vulnerability just out of sheer pain. Yeah, it's just how human beings are hardwired. We get motivated to do things when we're in enough pain, which is unfortunate, but then we can continue to do it without needing that pain.
And that's absolutely why prevention is so significantly a part of what we do. For me, I do a lot of prevention. So that is the reason why we have these webinars, we have these conversations. And sometimes you don't hear until you get into the situation. But many times, if we can set you up for success before that, and okay, I had a traumatic experience, I'm in the acute phase, let me call Sirona Healing so that we can get in now before we get too far past where, too far down the line. So that being said, so Gabrielle, just let us know, how do we get in touch with you? How do we get in touch with you? And tell us the difference between what you can do if you're in the state of California versus not in the state of California.
So great. Thanks for the question. So here's a couple of ways to get in touch. There's my email address as well as the website and email address for Sirona Healing Center. And so we've done a couple of different things, and there's two ways to receive support from Sirona. So if you're in the state of California, we have an integrated program, actually California and Arizona, an integrative program that combines wellness-based services, things like trauma-focused yoga, breath work, sound healing, with somatics therapy, with evidence-based clinical therapies. And so we have a individualized program that really is tailored to each person, that combines those two. And then outside of those two states, those wellness services can really be accessed and received by anyone. So we have both a resource library of all kinds of stress management tools and strategies, as well as live classes that people can attend. And what we'd like to do for those of you that were on today's webinar is to give you access to that resource library for 30 days so you can experience just some of those tools and really, help you with your stress management. So that's what the QR code is. If you just go scan that and enter your information, and then you'll get access to those tools.
Good. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. At Viva Life, we like to make sure you have resources and tools. This is an action-oriented type of membership and community. And so that's why we bring on subject matter experts that can help us with that in different states around the world, not just the country, but around the world. So I want to say, Gabrielle, thank you so much for being on. I think that's all the questions that we had from our audience, as well as some of the questions that we came up with during our conversation. I think this is truly powerful, and everybody that's on, please share this. Our social media platforms will come automatically in your inbox. But drkellyomd.com, drkellyomd.com has all our media platforms. It will come on YouTube once we finish the editing. And then also, if you are a friend of Sirona Healing, go ahead. Let's follow each other. Let's go ahead and follow each other. And I'm just so grateful that we can have this conversation live and be honest, authentic, and be vulnerable. So thank you, everybody. And if you need anything, you know how to reach us. We gave you all of the information. So have a wonderful day, and don't forget to do what? Viva Life. All right. Thank you for being a part of the Viva Life experience. I'm Dr. Kelly OMD, board certified OBGYN and healthcare executive. If you like what you heard, then please go ahead and like, share, and subscribe. The reason why is because we are trying to educate, encourage, and inspire 1 million people to live their healthiest and wealthiest life. And this is what we're bringing you. We're bringing you educational videos. We're bringing you podcasts. We are bringing you webinars with subject matter experts, including myself, about the topics that affect you the most. So go ahead, like, subscribe, and share. We are everywhere. Have a wonderful day. Be alive.